Morning arrived without color. Low cloud pressed against the hills beyond the settlement, flattening distance into a pale surface that reflected little light. Moisture clung to the ground in a thin, unmoving layer. Footpaths remained visible only where repeated use had darkened the soil. A narrow road curved past a row of temporary structures whose wooden boards had begun to warp at the edges. Smoke rose from a chimney, then thinned and disappeared before reaching the height of the nearby trees. Nothing suggested urgency, only continuation. Inside one of the buildings, a table stood near a window that admitted a muted gray brightness. Papers were arranged in careful stacks, weighted by a small stone taken from the roadside. A coat hung from a nail driven into the wall, its fabric stiff where rain had dried unevenly. The room carried the stillness of work performed out of habit rather than necessity. Tasks repeated because stopping would require explanation. In the years following Germany's collapse, families connected to the former leadership adjusted to lives shaped less by authority than by procedure. Their surroundings narrowed. Travel required permission. Addresses changed frequently. Conversations became cautious, measured not by honesty alone but by consequence. Among these families were the children of Albert Speer, once positioned close to the administrative center of the Reich, now dispersed across quieter landscapes where recognition could fade. For them, the transition unfolded gradually rather than suddenly. There was no single moment when the past ended. Early memories often remained practical, waiting in unfamiliar offices, standing beside adults who answered questions in controlled tones, watching officials write notes that were never explained. The children learned to remain still, to speak only when addressed, to treat silence as a form of safety. Such habits persisted long after the questioning ended. Housing changed more than once. Rooms were smaller, shared, sometimes temporary. Windows admitted cold air that coal shortages made difficult to resist. Furniture appeared mismatched, gathered from storage or donation. The scale of earlier domestic life, space, routine, predictable comfort, contracted into narrower measurements defined by ration cards and seasonal weather. School introduced another form of adjustment. Classrooms contained children whose families carried different histories of the war. Some names passed without comment. Others lingered in the air a moment too long. Teachers rarely addressed the past directly, yet pauses in conversation revealed awareness. Learning continued within this quiet tension, where ordinary lessons unfolded beside unspoken knowledge. Within the family, discussion of earlier years remained limited. Adults answered questions briefly or redirected them toward daily concerns. The children learned that certain subjects produced distance rather than clarity. Photographs existed but were not displayed prominently. Letters were stored away. Memory functioned privately, without clear boundaries between preservation and avoidance. Visits to their father occurred under supervision. Travel to the prison required planning, permission, and patience. Waiting rooms carried a formal stillness shaped by routine security checks and controlled schedules. Conversations across the table remained restrained. Questions about daily life replaced broader reflection. Time was measured not by freedom but by the duration of the visit and the certainty of departure. For a child, such meetings offered fragments rather than explanations. A familiar voice heard in an unfamiliar place. Presence defined by limitation. After each visit, the return journey felt longer. Roads appeared ordinary again, yet something of the enclosure remained. Family life resumed its routine: meals, schoolwork, small domestic repairs, while the separation persisted quietly in the background. As years passed, external attention shifted toward reconstruction. Cities required rebuilding. Administrative systems stabilized. Public conversation moved gradually from immediate aftermath toward structured memory. Within this broader change, families once closely tied to power became less visible, absorbed into ordinary civic patterns shaped by employment, education, and time. For Speer's daughter, understanding developed slowly. Historical knowledge did not arrive as a single revelation but as accumulation. Documents read, testimonies encountered, conversations overheard. Public narratives differed from private memory. The distance between them required careful navigation, neither fully rejecting childhood experience nor ignoring historical record. This tension defined much of adult reflection. To acknowledge affection for a parent while confronting the scale of the regime's crimes demanded a language that avoided simplification. Emotional certainty proved difficult to sustain beside documented reality. Silence, once protective, became insufficient. Yet speech also carried risk, the possibility of misunderstanding, accusation, or unintended defense. Writing offered one path through this uncertainty. Not resolution, but articulation. Descriptions of family life focused on ordinary details. Meals prepared, holidays observed, routines maintained despite external authority. Such memories did not deny historical violence. Rather, they revealed how domestic normality could coexist beside political destruction without visible contradiction. This coexistence remained one of the most troubling aspects of the era precisely because it lacked dramatic clarity. Readers searching for confession or condemnation sometimes found neither. Instead, they encountered hesitation. Hesitation reflected the complexity of memory shaped during childhood and reconsidered in adulthood. It acknowledged affection without absolution, distance without indifference. The tone remained measured, resisting both defense and theatrical remorse. In this restraint lay a different form of testimony, one concerned less with judgment than with recognition of ambiguity. Public response varied. Some regarded such reflections as necessary contributions to understanding how ordinary family structures intersected with systems of power. Others viewed them with suspicion, fearing minimization of responsibility. Debate unfolded quietly through reviews, discussions, and academic analysis rather than confrontation. Time continued its steady movement. By the later decades of the 20th century, generational change altered the context of memory. Those with direct experience aged. Archives expanded. Historical study emphasized structures, institutions, and administrative language. Personal narratives became one element within a broader effort to comprehend how violence had been organized and sustained. Within this environment, the voice of a daughter carried particular weight, not because it resolved moral questions, but because it revealed proximity. Childhood perception existed close to authority yet distant from decision-making. This position illuminated how awareness can remain partial even within privileged space. Family life, described in such accounts, appeared structured by routine rather than ideology. Meals occurred at regular hours. Homework required attention. Illness brought concern. Nothing in these moments alone explained the surrounding political system. Yet together they formed the environment through which children understood the world. Only later did historical knowledge reshape that understanding, introducing contradictions memory alone could not address. Old photographs retained their quiet presence. Faces looked outward without context. Clothing suggested order. Backgrounds revealed little. To view them after learning the broader history required a form of double vision, seeing both the ordinary family scene and the concealed structures enabling it. This layered perception became central to later reflection, where memory and history could no longer remain separate. Silence, once habitual, changed meaning over time. In childhood, it protected. In adulthood, it questioned. Choosing to speak did not dissolve uncertainty. Words arranged experience but could not settle it. The past remained resistant to conclusion, shaped by evidence, emotion, and absence alike. Writing therefore functioned less as explanation than as acknowledgement of limits. Meanwhile, everyday life continued. Workplaces demanded attention. Relationships formed. Children grew. Ordinary time moved forward regardless of unresolved history. This persistence of routine, so similar to the domestic rhythms described from earlier years, suggested continuity where rupture might have been expected. Yet the meaning of routine had changed, now carrying awareness rather than innocence. In later life, reflection often returned to small sensory details rather than grand events. Light through a window, the sound of distant traffic, paper turning in a quiet room. Such details held memory without argument. They neither accused nor defended. They simply remained. Historians examining these personal accounts approach them cautiously. Memory could illuminate experience yet also obscure responsibility. The value lay not in factual precision alone, but in revealing how individuals understood their surroundings at the time. Within this framework, a daughter's recollections contributed to a broader mosaic of post-war reckoning. Fragmentary, incomplete, yet necessary. No single narrative resolved the relationship between private affection and public crime. Instead, understanding emerged through accumulation. Documents, testimonies, reflections, silences. Each added dimension without closing interpretation. The landscapes of post-war Germany changed gradually. Temporary buildings disappeared. Roads widened. Trees matured. Physical reconstruction softened visible traces of destruction. Yet, memory persisted in less tangible forms: archives, literature, conversation. Within these spaces, personal voices continued to surface, offering perspectives shaped by proximity rather than distance. Old age introduced another quiet transition. Public attention moved elsewhere. Debates lost urgency. Names once widely recognized faded into specialized study. For those who had lived within the immediate shadow of power, this fading produced neither relief nor resolution. It simply marked the passage of time, indifferent to moral complexity. Memory remained, carried privately, altered by years yet never entirely removed. In the end, what Albert Speer's daughter revealed about family life was not a hidden secret or decisive judgment. It was something quieter. She showed how ordinary domestic existence could unfold beside extraordinary violence without clearly perceiving it. She demonstrated how love, loyalty, ignorance, and later knowledge could coexist within a single life. Most of all, she illustrated how memory continues after history's central events have passed, asking questions that documentation alone cannot answer. Evening settles in much the same way morning once arrived, without color, without announcement. Windows reflect only present light. Inside, rooms contain familiar objects arranged for daily use. Nothing in their appearance explains the past that once shaped them. Yet the past remains, held in recollection rather than display. Not resolved, not erased, only carried forward, quietly into ordinary time.